Hello. I want to talk about the new changes to the Guardian Ascendancy and what they mean for the Dominating Blow build. For those of you that don't know me, back in 3.18 I put out a huge hour-long guide to Dominating Blow Guardian, and I received tons of positive feedback on it, and I've been updating it whenever the game got major updates. I don't really plan on doing a full guide update this time around, but I do want to at least go over the changes to the Guardian and what they mean for the build. Spoilers, it doesn't look very promising, but there might be some small silver linings in there. So I'm going to be focusing on the Ascendancy nodes that we actually took on the Dominating Blow build, as well as any new nodes that we might be taking now on the new Guardian with the changes. And I'll just start in order of the order that we would have taken them while leveling on the old build. Which means, first of all, we have Radiant Crusade. It's in the bottom right there. Grants level 20 summon Sentinel of Radiance skill. 10% of damage from hits is taken from your Sentinel of Radiance's life before you. This is completely different from what it was before. In at least one good way, maybe some more depending on what that minion does, but in a few bad ways as well. First of all, let's just compare it to the old Radiant Crusade. The old Radiant Crusade had plus 20 to all elemental resistances. While there are at least 5 nearby allies, you nearby allies have Onslaught, and deal 10% more damage. So that means that we have already lost 20% all elemental resistances. That's a lot of gear pressure that was easily alleviated by 2 points on this tree, that now becomes gear pressure on the build once again. Also, losing Onslaught obviously sucks. That's a lot of speed. It's a lot of movement speed for clearing the campaign. It's a lot of attack speed for damage. Onslaught is just a really nice buff to have. You can get it elsewhere, but getting it for free, basically permanently, because you basically have enough minions all the time, was just really nice. And now it's gone. Also, losing 10% more damage, that's a significant damage loss. There's no other way to say that. On the other hand, 10% of damage from hits is taken from your Sentinel of Radiance's life before you. That is basically 10% more life, except against damage over time. Unfortunately, damage over time tends to be the more deadly things in this game. And most importantly, we don't know what that Sentinel of Radiance does. That Sentinel of Radiance might share Onslaught with nearby allies. It might do something like that, and if it does, then we didn't actually lose anything. So it's impossible to really say all of what this change means to the build until we see patch notes and what this minion does. But something to take note of there is that this minion better be very tanky, or it's going to die a lot. Because if it's taking 10% of the damage from you, then hopefully it either is very tanky and can take that damage, or it respawns very quickly. So next we have Unwavering Crusade. That's in the bottom middle there. 25% chance to trigger level 20 summon elemental relic when you or a nearby ally kill an enemy. This is completely different from what it used to be. We have no idea what summon elemental relic does yet, but we do know that this is an on-kill effect, and on-kill effects generally are pretty unreliable for things like boss fights, which tends to be where the power from builds actually matters, because just clearing packs in maps and then map bosses is pretty easy regardless of your build. It pretty much comes down to, for mapping, you want some kind of speed and damage, and then for bosses, you want some kind of reliable, consistent power, either defensively or offensively. And trigger on kill effects are basically never reliable on boss fights without some really tedious setup. So again, we have no idea what this even does, so it's impossible to judge it. But just for comparison's sake, let's look at the old Unwavering Crusade. This is the old Unwavering Crusade. Nearby allies have 20% increased attack, cast, and movement speed, 30% increased area of effect, intimidate enemies for 4 seconds on hit, and unnerve enemies for 4 seconds on hit. The unnerve doesn't matter to us because it's not a spell damage build, but the intimidate is the same thing for attacks. Intimidate is extremely strong. The way debuffing enemies to take increased damage works is that you add all of those enemies take increased damage modifiers together, you add them all together, and that acts like a single more damage multiplier on your build. And of course, 20% increased attack speed, well, that's also kind of like 20% more damage. It's a little more complicated than that. So the old Unwavering Crusade was incredible for DPS on this build, and it's impossible to say what the new one is going to be like, but considering it's called Elemental Relic, I doubt it really has anything to do with this build, since this is a physical damage build. You can make an Elemental Dominating Blow build, but the build guide that I created was physical damage. So this new Unwavering Crusade does not look promising at all. It looks like we lost a lot. Next, let's talk about Bastion of Hope, because this is one of the better changes, I think, but it still lost something important. If you've attacked recently, you and nearby allies have plus 25% chance to block attack damage. If you've cast a spell recently, you and nearby allies have plus 25% chance to block spell damage. Now let's just compare the old Bastion of Hope really quick because they're very similar. This is the old Bastion of Hope. Let's look at the bottom two modifiers first. It's the same as the new ones, except it was plus 10% instead of plus 25%. So that's a nice buff. That's 15% extra block chance and spell block chance. And if you remember from the guide, we actually set up this build so that this is always active. We have always attacked recently, and we've always cast a spell recently. We do that because our main skill is an attack, so we're attacking all the time. Plus Leap Slam is our movement skill, which is an attack, so we're attacking all the time. And as far as spells, we put Convocation on left click, which keeps our minions with us, and it's a spell with less than 4-second cooldown, which means we've always cast a spell recently. So just getting a straight 15% block and spell block buff all the time is very, very nice. And remember that it affects allies too, so it does make your minions quite a bit tankier. Now let's look at the first two mods. 50% chance to block for 2 seconds every 5 seconds. This was honestly pretty useless. I mean, it was powerful when it was active, but you couldn't rely on it being active, so I don't mind that this is gone at all. They took this unreliable buff away, and then they took some of its power and put it into the consistent buffs that we get instead. That is much better in my opinion, so that is actually a very good change. But then the next line. If you've blocked in the past 10 seconds, you and nearby allies cannot be stunned. This is pretty much all the time, because on this build we get enough block chance to block very frequently, which meant that this build was basically stun immune. And now, this is just gone. We've just completely lost stun immunity. So while I like the block changes, I definitely don't like losing stun immunity. Next, let's talk about Time of Need, and I don't really want to talk about this one because it makes me angry. But here we go. Every 4 seconds, remove curses and elemental ailments from you. Every 4 seconds, regenerate 100% of life over 1 second. So if not for that second line, this would be the worst ascendancy node on the entire tree, and it wouldn't even be close. That first line makes me angry because it requires a blatant and complete misunderstanding of how this game is played at literally every level of proficiency. I don't know how a single developer was able to look at that and think it was okay. Every 4 seconds, removing curses and elemental ailments just means, what about the other 3.9 seconds? If this cycle just passed and then you get frozen, are you going to sit there waiting for 4 seconds to be unfrozen? Nobody plays this game like that. Not a single person plays this game like that. It doesn't even have to just be freezes either. How about ignites? How many ignites that last 4 seconds can you afford to actually tank for 4 seconds? And then curses are the same. If this 4 seconds just passed and then you get cursed with elemental weakness, you're just stuck with reduced resistances for 4 seconds. And it's a full effect elemental weakness, because let's take a quick look at the old Time of Need. Here's the old Time of Need. 80% reduced effect of curses on you, every 4 seconds, regenerate 30% of life over 1 second. That 80% reduced effect of curses on you meant you basically didn't need to worry about curses, and if you really wanted to, you could combine this either with a Yugal Pantheon, or a single jewel, or a few points in the Asylum Wheel, and you would become basically completely immune to curses, all the time, without requiring a 4-second wait period to deal with curses. The way the old Time of Need dealt with curses was just objectively better to the new one, in nearly every possible use case. And then the other line on the old Time of Need is every 4 seconds regenerate 30% of life over 1 second. Now this has changed to 100%. This means every 4 seconds you just get a full heal. That's actually really nice, because this 30% life regeneration is pretty nice. It used to be 50% before it was nerfed, and that was pretty nice. Now that it's 100%, that is one thing that we at least can't really complain about. That is, a full heal every 4 seconds is nice. There isn't really much else to say about that. But then you might have noticed that the old Time of Need doesn't do anything to elemental ailments, but in my opinion, neither does the new Time of Need. That just isn't the way this game is played. You can't just wait around for 4 seconds for problematic ailments to be removed from you. That's how your character dies. So we might still take the new Time of Need just for that full heal every 4 seconds, but that would be the only reason. Like I said, if it weren't for that second line, this would be the worst ascendancy node in the entire game in literally every possible use case. So yeah, looking at Time of Need makes me a little bit frustrated. Now I'm going to quickly go over the other nodes because we don't really use them on this build. Radiant Faith, this is just the Mana Guardian node. This isn't really used on this build because it's not a Mana Guardian build. You can make a Mana Guardian Dominating Blow build, but it's completely different from the one that I have a guide up for. So you would have to look elsewhere for that, and honestly, you should look elsewhere for opinions on this node because I don't really use it. Unwavering Faith, this gives recovery rate of life, mana, and energy shield based on how many auras you have active. This is actually quite strong. Recovery rate of life is very strong because it stacks multiplicatively with your life regen, which means that builds like Righteous Fire really like this stat. But the Templar already has a perfect candidate for Righteous Fire in the Inquisitor. I don't think you would ever make a Righteous Fire Guardian when you could make an Inquisitor instead. I suppose you could make an Inquisitor and then steal Unwavering Faith with the Forbidden Jewels, but that shouldn't even be necessary. So while this node has uses, it's mainly on an Aura bot, which isn't what we're discussing here. And then the last node, Harmony of Purpose in the top left. This one is weird. In this one, they have really doubled down on the link skills in this game that no one really uses because they're primarily a co-op play skill. There is a way to use them with minions, but it doesn't really get used because if the linked minion dies, then you die too. So it's only really usable with something extremely tanky like Animate Guardian. But let's talk about it anyway. Elemental damage with hits dealt by allies between you and linked targets is lucky. Lucky damage is very nice, but we don't deal elemental damage, so it doesn't matter. Allies between you and linked targets have plus 5% to all maximum elemental resistances. That would be incredible if it were you and allies, but I don't think that includes you. We don't really care that much about the maximum resistances of our minions. We mainly keep them sustained by having enough attack speed to constantly respawn them, and by having a cluster jewel with Blessed Rebirth to make them invincible for 4 seconds on summon. Enemies between you and linked targets cannot apply elemental ailments. So this one is weird because it's kind of good, although it only affects enemies in a line, which is pretty situational. It also clashes with Time of Need. There are 2 different nodes on this Ascendancy wheel that deal with elemental ailments, and neither of them are very good. I want to take a second to look at an Ascendancy node that is actually good at dealing with elemental ailments. This is the Raider's Avatar of the Veil. 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments while phasing. There are a lot of ways to get chance to avoid elemental ailments. You can combine this with some gear or some points on the tree to easily get this up to 100%. And that while phasing condition on this node is just all the time, because this node that leads to it is permanent phasing. This is how to actually design a solution to elemental ailments that is reliable and usable. It needs to be something that doesn't rely on just by chance happening at the time when you need it. The reason we didn't use the old Harmony of Purpose is because it specified party members, and minions are not actually considered party members, they are considered allies. Which means that at least the new Harmony of Purpose actually works with them, but I just don't think it's very good. So there are a few pretty minor wins on this tree, but for the most part, we lost a lot. And it's really going to depend mostly on what that Sentinel of Radiance skill actually does to determine if this is still the right class to pick when playing Dominating Blow. Because right now, it looks like Necromancer is just going to be better again. One last thing to talk about, and I don't have an image for this because it's not up on their website yet, is that they teased a new gem called Fresh Meat Support, and this gem gives recently summoned minions Adrenaline. Adrenaline is an extremely strong buff, and it will almost certainly be one of the gems used with Dominating Blow, because Dominating Blow is a skill that constantly summons minions all the time. It's constantly replacing old minions with new ones, so those new minions are coming in with Adrenaline. And then if you get enough attack speed, it pretty much means that your minions are going to have Adrenaline all the time. So that is very strong. Adrenaline gives 100% increased damage, 25% increased attack, cast, and movement speed, and 10% physical damage reduction. The physical damage reduction doesn't really matter on these minions, but those first 2 modifiers are an absolute ton of damage. It is basically the highest damage increase buff in the entire game. So while that sounds great, because obviously it will be nice to have minions with Adrenaline all the time, remember I said it was a gem. It's a support gem. It takes a socket in your 6-link. The 6-link on this build already had plenty of competition for those gem sockets. Every gem is already very good. And while Fresh Meat Support, because it gives Adrenaline, will almost certainly be better than most of those gems and will almost certainly slot into one of those sockets, it still comes at an opportunity cost, because any gem that it could replace was already giving us about 20% more damage or higher. So in conclusion, basically, I just need to see patch notes to see what Sentinel of Radiance actually does. But other than that, Dominating Blow Guardian does not look promising. Thank you for watching, I appreciate your time, and hopefully I turn out to be wrong.